Hello and welcome to another video. Now, some of you have probably seen me wear this shirt on other videos in the past. So today, on the second shout out video, I will be shouting out basically the folks who gave me this shirt and the photography page that they run. This shirt says, I love Klaipėda, which is, Klaipėda is the major port city of Lithuania. And I love Klaipėda is a photography page on Facebook devoted sort of to very nice portrayals of sort of the Lithuanian coast. This ship in the middle here is called, I think, Meridianos. I'm probably butchering the name. I haven't heard a lot of Lithuanian names actually pronounced. But it's sort of one of the major landmarks of the city, and it's apparently a restaurant. But at any rate, I was I very much appreciate the sort of photography that you see on the site. It includes both urban photography and also nature photography, and it's a great site with lots and lots of great photographers. The second thing I probably want to say is I want to thank one of the photographers and videographers on the site who spent a lot of time helping me with the dish today. Again, I've never heard his name pronounced, so I'm probably going to butcher it, but Viačeslavas Bazikas, thank you very, very much for the amount of effort and advice going into this dish today. But at any rate, in honor of all of this, I've decided to make Cepelinai, which means Zeppelins. These are stuffed potato dumplings. There are variants of it across Poland and Lithuania, but they are sort of one of the main Lithuanian dishes of cuisine that people think of. These are sort of oblong potato dumplings, kind of sort of similar to what you see in Germany, but they're stuffed with meat and things like that. And so that's what we're going to make today. As a final disclaimer, I've never actually tried authentic Cepelinai. Therefore, well, I've spent a lot of time with tutorials and I've gotten a lot of help from a bunch of very, very kind Lithuanians on how to make these. I still am not perfectly confident that these are proper or that the dish that I make is a good portrayal of Lithuanian cuisine as a whole. So please keep that in mind. I'm going through everything I've learned, and at the end I will have a session where I talk about what to do if things go wrong, so you can still kind of make a decent meal out of maybe imperfect Zeppelins. But you know, this is a sort of flagship dish of Lithuanian cuisine. So the first part of the ingredients are the potatoes and associated items. I'm starting with 3 large baking potatoes. So these are the sorts of potatoes you'd make baked potatoes out of. Idaho potatoes are really good for this, you know, the Idaho russet potatoes. But the important thing is that these have to be very starchy. And they have to be solid, and for reasons that will become very apparent, it's very nice if they're large. And we're going to grate these into a paste, and today we'll do it by hand, but in Lithuania they have special machines for doing this. So this is about a little over 500 grams for, as I say, one person. Then I have a small potato here, and this should weigh about 1/10 as much as these. Okay, and we're going to boil this and rice it, and I'll get to that in a bit. Then I have some lemon. The major reason for the lemon is actually the vitamin C, and you can use a vitamin C tablet instead. Just crush it up, but I think it's easier and maybe more familiar to work with lemon juice. So I'm going to take half this lemon, I'm going to squeeze it into the bowl when I grate the potatoes, and this will keep them from darkening. If you don't use the lemon, you'll get something much, much darker. It's still tasty, but you know, if you want the color to be nice and light, then you want to use vitamin C or lemon juice. Next, I'm going to cover the filling and the topping directly together. The filling is going to be a bit of pork, some onion, not this whole onion, but part of it. I'm going to season it with salt, pepper, and some basil. And that'll be the filling. The topping will be the rest of this onion and some bacon. And then I will add some sour cream on top of that. For the sour cream, I've decided to go with Russian style sour cream. I don't really know that much about the different versions, but here in Germany, I can mostly find French style and Russian style, and I figure Russian style is maybe closer than French style is. So they're not that different. It's probably hard to go wrong, but this is what I've decided to settle on here. Now we have some special equipment to cover here. First, I'm going to talk about this box grater. Now, when people think of grated potatoes, especially Americans, they think of using this side. And that's what we use to make hash browns. But for potato dumplings, this doesn't work. It doesn't work for potato pancakes either. So obviously, this is the slicing side. We're not going to use it. This is a bit closer. This is the coarse grater. And, you know, you can use the coarse grater for many things, but if you try to use this side with these dumplings, they will come out kind of fibrous and very hard. And they'll also kind of dissolve a little bit in the water. So we're not going to use this. We're going to focus on this side. And I'm going to grate all of the potatoes on this side of this box grater. This is the fine grater. This is the side, if you're an American, you would use to grate nutmeg for, you know, going on like an eggnog or something. Most people are not very familiar with using this side. I'll go over some tricks to save your fingers and stuff like that. But the single most important thing is use big potatoes, because the smaller the potatoes, the more annoying they are to work with. So that's the box grater. And again, the fine grating side, this is the side we'll use for this. Second major piece of equipment I have here is a potato press. And I'm actually going to use the large hold piece at the bottom. I've tried both and this works fine. And basically, once I boil and take the skin off the small potato, it's going to go in here and I'm going to press it through. And this is going to basically mash this down into something that goes nicely in the that goes nicely into the dough. And the final important piece of equipment here is actually this cloth bag. And you can use just about any muslin bag, ideally with a nice fine mesh. You want a natural fabric if possible. I got this at the grocery store as a grocery bag. But it's very important that we get as much water out of the grated potatoes as possible. And so we're going to put the potato pulp in this bag and squeeze out as much of the liquid as we can. Please don't use something that you care about the color. You don't think about potatoes as staining, but these do. Also, as soon as you're done with this, wash it, because there's almost nothing more putrid than rotting potato pulp. You really don't want that sitting in this bag on this bag for a while. So definitely be warned. So as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to rinse it out, throw it in the washing machine, and away we'll go. Finally, there are a few places in this recipe where we use starch. This is cornstarch. It works. Potato starch also works. Tapioca flour would also work, if you're in a part of the world where that's sort of more common. But we'll use this in a couple of different ways as we go through this dish, and it's actually a really important component. So make sure that you have a fair bit of this, more than of course you plan to use, on hand. So here I have a bowl with a small amount of lemon juice. Here I have my box grater with the fine grate side here. I've peeled these potatoes. And the small potato I've put in a fair bit of water, and I've turned the burner on. We'll boil it for a while. And basically, I'm just going to grate this. Now, the thing that people usually complain about when grating potatoes is that one of two things happen. Either they rub their fingers against the grater, and that can be unpleasant, or their arms get tired, and that's the more likely problem. So on the fine grating side, it's actually not as sharp as the coarse grater. So you're not as likely to hurt yourself on it. So that's the good news. The bad news is it does take longer to grate the potatoes. So I'm just going to grate one of these here, and then I'll come back after the others are grated. This is the largest part of work on this. And usually what I do is I just, grate on both sides, and then I'll grate down the middle on the two remaining sides, and this will give me kind of a stick of potato that I can then grate on the final dimension. Now, the part of this that's hardest on your arms is when you get to the end. So this is a big reason to start with large potatoes, because the smaller the potatoes are, the more annoying they are when you get to this final part. And the more time you spend grating small pieces of potato. Now, once you get to about this point, basically, and then finally when I get to the end, which I will in 1 second, then I'll show you how to deal with the end of the potato. So, and I have these little pieces here. I'm just going to put them in, and I'm just going to smash them as best as I can against these protrusions. And then when I go with the next potato, I'll just show you. I can, as I do this, I will basically grate them along with everything else. So there's one. When I get done with each potato, I'm going to kind of scrape this off as best I can. As I said, this is a paste. It's kind of more the consistency of applesauce than anything else. And I'm going to pour it into the bowl with the lemon juice. And I'm just going to lightly stir it. You can use your fingers, whatever. The point is to coat it with the lemon juice so it doesn't get dark. Then I will do the same with the other two potatoes, and we'll come back and do the squeezing. So I'm going to show you how I press the potatoes. Other people might have their own methods, but since this bowl is mostly full, I'm going to empty it. Then I'm going to take my cloth bag. I'm going to set it in so that one corner of the bag is setting into this bowl. Okay, like this. And then I'm going to fill it up by pouring this inside. The goal is to have as much of this in as small a section of the bag as possible, because as we go towards wringing this out, we want it to be pretty concentrated. So now it's here. And what I'm going to do, there are a few different ways of doing it, but I'm going to start by just pressing it with my hands. And you can see a lot of liquids coming out. And in fact, there isn't that much left in the bag. That's perfectly normal. Okay, now that I've wrung out most of the water like that, I'm going to take this bag and I'm just going to twist it slowly. But I'm going to exert some pressure. And I'm going to keep twisting it. And then now we just don't have that much stuff left in. You'll see how much of that was just liquid. So now we're going to invert the bag. And yes, there's a little bit of extra liquid here. It's not the end of the world, but I'm going to basically invert it, which you're going to see. So we have this dry dough-like stuff inside. And wow, I got liquid out of this, like, very well. Now, as a general rule, you should get as much of the liquid out as you possibly can. You can always add some liquid back, but once you go to the next step, it's hard to re-extract it. So this is maybe on the dry side. It's not the end of the world. We'll get into that later. You'll see this is very, 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 very dough-like. So there's our potato pulp, and you'll see this is pretty dry. As I say, I'll probably end up adding a little bit of liquid back in, even after I add the starch, but we'll come back to that in a moment. In the meantime, the other potato is boiling. We're going to let it boil until it's soft. It might be another 10-15 minutes, and then we'll come back. While we are waiting, I'm going to cut about 1/4 of this onion to mix with the meat. But I'm actually going to go ahead and just cut the whole onion. I'm just going to put 1/4 of it in with the meat. The reason for this is I'm scaling down this recipe far enough that it just doesn't make sense to prepare those separately. So we should always finely chop the onion. And especially take the fine pieces, especially, should go in here. And we're going to put in, as I say, about half of this onion. I think that should be good. Season with some pepper. Dash of salt. And basil. And now I'm just going to mix this up with my hands. And there we go. Now, at this point, I'm going to cut the rest of this onion, set it aside, and we'll go ahead and use that for the bacon later, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So I've boiled this potato and now it's soft. If I stick it with a fork, it's very soft. I'm going to run this under cold water and just simply peel the skin off very quickly. Once I get done with that, I will run it through the potato ricer and add the result to this dough. So I'll be back in a few seconds after I've pulled the skin off, and you'll get to see the ricer in action. So here we have the ricer. In goes the potato. And out comes the riced potato. And that's basically all there is to it. See how easy that was? Now, the next step is I'm going to pour off most of this water, and I'm going to leave the starch at the bottom. Then I'm going to mix that in. In the meantime, I'm going to lightly salt the dough there, and I'll be right back after I get rid of most of this water. So now you can see there's starch at the bottom, and a fair bit of it. So I'm going to dump that on here also. Then I'm going to mix all of this together into a dough, and I will evaluate whether it needs to get more liquid or not. Now, one of the key aspects to this is starch content. So this should be very slightly sticky or moderately sticky. I think this is just about right. Definitely you can feel the stickiness. As you make it, you want to try a few different times. If it doesn't feel sticky enough, then add a little bit of the cornstarch or potato starch. And I have a little bit more starch here I can add. I'm just going to sop it all out this way. Yeah, and that's starting to get a little more sticky. Perfect. You can hear that sticking to my hands. That's a good sign. Okay, so one of the things I strongly recommend when cooking unfamiliar food is look especially at the professional tips section. And if you don't understand something in there, then it means that maybe something isn't the right consistency. Figuring out starch is one of the hard parts about this dish. And I would say, getting it so that that we have just a bit of stickiness in the dough, the right amount, that takes some practice. So, again, I've never eaten ones in Lithuania or made by Lithuanians, so therefore I can't say exactly what is the right level of stickiness, but this seems to match all the tutorials and stuff that I've watched. So now, to form these, start with the filling, and I'm just going to kind of squeeze it into kind of an oblong shape like that. I'm going to take one of these, and my hands are already wet, so that's good. You want to keep your hands a bit wet so that the dough doesn't stick to them. And we're going to squeeze this into a nice, disc. Going to wrap this around. And it's okay if it doesn't form up perfectly and close perfectly at first. We just need to get it effectively mostly there. And then I'm going to get a little more water on my hands. And I'm going to pass this back and forth between my hands to smooth it all out. And here we have one. So similarly, on the next one, I think this is a small amount more dough, so this should go a little bit easier. Fold it over. And then back and forth between the hands. Next, we'll dust these with cornstarch so that they don't fall apart when we cook them, and then we'll keep going. So now the next step is we're going to dust these with starch. The reason to do this is it keeps them from falling apart when we cook them. So we dust the top, turn them over, dust the bottom, and away we go. We can roll them over a little bit, but this will basically form sort of a coating around the outside, and it will prevent them from falling apart in the water. Now, the easy way to dust them, if you're an American, is to use like a flour sifter. If you're not in the US, then just put stuff on a sieve and run your starch through a sieve onto everything. Then you can roll it over the starch that's left on your surface and cover those other parts. So that's that. The next step is I'm going to prepare the water. So for the water, I'm going to add some salt, and then I'm going to add some starch. Again, adding starch helps make sure that it doesn't disintegrate as you cook it. It's technically optional, but highly recommended. I'm going to then bring this to a boil, and once it's in a nice boil, then we'll come back. So now this water is boiling. I'm going to take the two Zeppelins, and I'm just going to gently add them to the water. Then I'm going to take a utensil, in this case it's a fork, but you can use whatever works well. I'm just going to nudge them along the bottom a little bit. And the reason is, I found when I don't do that, sometimes they stick. I'm also going to turn this pan up. I'm going to start it on about a medium high, and as it starts to cook, I'll turn it down. To that pan, I'm going to add my bacon. And once it's cooking, I'm going to add the onions. This is really easy. It's just bacon. Once it cooks, add some onions, cook it. These are going to cook in here for about 20 minutes. So don't just wait until they float, because they won't be done on the inside. Just keep them cooking in there for about 20 minutes. So the bacon's starting to cook. In maybe another couple of minutes, I will add the onions. So it's been a couple more minutes. The bacon's starting to render, so I'm going to add the onions. And I'm just going to cook these together for another 4 or 5 minutes, so that everything kind of cooks nicely, and the onions should kind of just kind of get to the right place. So I'll be back in 4 or 5 minutes, and you'll be able to see where this is. So here it is after about 3 minutes, and I think I'm just about to have it finish. Now, depending on how much onions and bacon you like, this may be enough for 2-3 people, but if you like a lot more onions, a lot more bacon, this is certainly what you can just add. Onions are actually really nutritious, so it's it's a good amount of vegetables in this, and so I didn't add that much bacon, so this will be good. I think this will be, I'll just go ahead and put all this on the same plate. I'm just going to take this off the heat so it doesn't burn. I've made that mistake before, and we'll go ahead and let that sit. So while we're waiting for the last few minutes for this to finish cooking, let's just discuss a few things that can go wrong, mistakes I've made in the past, and what to do about them. The first thing is that the first few times you make this, you may be using potatoes that might not be starchy enough. And so take a little bit of dough, try cooking it in the water to make sure the consistency is okay. And if it disintegrates, then what you can do instead is you can try to steam the dumplings and eat them that way. They're not as good that way, and definitely if you have to do it, you'll have something that's a lot heavier and a lot more filling and probably a bit harder on your stomach. But sometimes if you're trying to cook a dinner, you know, what else are you going to do? A second thing that might go wrong is if you don't add the lemon juice or vitamin C, you'll get it to just darken, and it'll be kind of a darkish sort of brown paper bag color. That's, you know, it's not going to affect the taste, but it does affect the presentation, so that's something to watch for. A third thing that can go wrong is if you don't pay attention when you start cooking them, they can stick to the bottom, in which case you'll have to pry them up and they might get damaged. And the fourth thing that can go wrong is you might take them out and realize when you cut into the first one that they're not done yet. In that case, wrap them in aluminum foil and put them back in the water, and they'll cook that way and won't fall apart. So those are the various things I've learned about what you could do to fix them. Also, if you take them out of the water and they're completely falling apart, you can throw them in the oven just for, 5 minutes or so to firm up just a little bit. So there are things you can do to fix problems as they come up, but they're not, going to be perfect. Anyway, hope that this is great. And in about, a few more minutes, we'll take these out and then go ahead and try them. So now it's been 20 minutes. I'm going to take this out, let it drain a little bit, and set it on my plate. Then you just set the plate down and arrange these like this. Let them sit a little bit of time. Like a lot of food, when you're done cooking these, they benefit from just a little bit of time resting. So I'm going to let this rest for about a minute or two. In the meantime, I'm going to spoon some of this over the top. I guess I'll spoon it all over the top. Yeah, that's firming up nicely. And so some people, I guess, like to add the sour cream to the onions and bacon as is cooking. Some others like to put the sour cream on the top like this. I like to put it on the top. So that's what I'm going to do. And there we have it. So now this is set for like a little over a minute. The skin's getting nice and firmer. Before I do the taste test, I want to say, if you spot anything that could be improved, especially if you're from Lithuania, more familiar with the cuisine, love to hear from you. As I say, not having tried this cuisine before, it's very hard for me to know if it's exactly right or not. But I'm going to go ahead and try this. So I'm trying with some of the bacon, onions, and the skin here. The meat inside is very, very nicely seasoned. So here this is. Bon appetit. Love to hear your comments. Love for you to reach out. Have a great day.